Yeah, that was one of the longer ones in terms of the click the button, then it finally tells you.
Yeah.
Like you sort of lose trust that the internet's going to work for a second.
Yeah. And I'm in the
Anyway,
plaza, so
yes, that is true. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday to you. Thanks for spending a few minutes with us. My name's Brent Hazelton. I'm Milwaukee Chamber Theater's artistic director. Super excited to be chatting with Torrey Hanson today, actor from the Thanksgiving play. And as you said, you're calling from the Plaza,
I am
um,
indeed. Room
which
186.
which oh, careful, stalkers
Yeah.
will find you.
Oh, yes.
Um, but the for people who don't know, the Plaza Hotel and Apartments up on Cass Street is the place where all of the out of town theater artists in Milwaukee tend to roost. And given that this is your first time back in town well, not back in town, but your first time back for a gig in
Hmm.
something like 11 or 12 years, how is it coming back to the Plaza after a decade away?
Well, it's interesting. I came here for the first time in 1993 for a season with Milwaukee Rep that turned into 17 seasons with Joe.
Yeah.
And so that was 28-year introduction long ago to the Plaza. Although I was having breakfast with Lee Ernst just a couple hours ago,
Oh, nice.
and my first time here was to visit Larry Shue at his room to get some makeup lessons in about 1981. So that was, I think it was 40 years ago. It was the first time I
Wow.
made my way into the Plaza for just a visit. And then it was 12 years after that in 93 that I came here for the first time. And I spent 17 seasons at the Rep, and all of them were with me being put up at the Plaza for anywhere from a couple of months to 7 months, 8 months. The normal season length running from August to May back in the day was pretty much filled completely with rehearsed performance duties at the Rep. So
Yeah.
I mean, the sum total of years I've spent in the Plaza, it's interesting. It's really, and I know all the different rooms I've been in and all that.
Uh-huh.
My microwave just went on the fritz, a couple days ago, and a knock came on the door after I put in a call to have it fixed, and a woman walked in, and her name was Ophelia, and
Oh, she's still there?
yeah, well, she saw me and she
Oh,
said, "I know you. Do I know you?" And I had a mask on, and I'm like,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know, and then she said, "Yes, yes, I remember you from all those years." But she remembered, with my mask
Oh,
on, and I then remembered her, and I went, "Oh my," because and I go, "How long have you been here?" "Oh, 40 years, 40 years." I
yeah.
go, "Okay, that accounts for you're remembering me," and I did remember her, but I saw her very infrequently, but she did. It was just very fun. And so it's great. The Plaza has always been a great resource for me because it's just a place I can come back, be alone, do my thing, run my lines.
Yeah.
And it was always a 12-minute walk to the Rep. I drive to Chamber Theater because I'm just lazier these days, but it's a nice, quick drive. And it's been a great sort of homecoming, actually. Really
Yeah.
nice.
Good. And what do you find different about the city from when you last spent some time here?
I suppose for me, I go back to the day when the Grand Avenue Mall was the big destination to walk into, and the two
Uh-huh.
anchor chain stores, Gimbals and what was at the other end? I forget, Marshall Fields or something like that.
Yeah.
And just the days in the '80s. I'm sure that's true. I don't know of any major downtown city that isn't true of, where things are dramatically changed in terms of just what's available in retail and things like that. But the city actually, on a just a friendship level and normal level of coming and going, is identical. Actually, it's like that.
Oh, cool.
For example, with Ophelia and everything like that, I go, oh
Yeah.
yes, of course. So there's no shift in that, and of course, it's hard to compare because of COVID and now Omicron and all those things, where there's still a different feeling to the world, and that's true in Chicago, where I hang my hat, and it's true of anywhere. But when it comes to going into stores, the same stores I went into to go shopping are there, and the environment is very fundamentally the same. So it doesn't take long to fall into the little niche of how Milwaukee's changed. I miss not having Mykonos next door to go over
Oh,
and have quick food before running off to do a show. That was a ritual I indulged in about twice a week back in the day.
wow.
So those things are changed, but everything else is really very much the same. Of course, the weather. This would normally be snow on the ground by the time
Yeah.
things like that. And I feel a lot of I do feel pangs of nostalgia for certain kinds of things that were here that are no longer here. When I first got here, Oriental Drug was up on the corner of Farwell Farwell and North, I think, yeah. And it was just, so I'm sort of an old timer geezer when it comes to remembering what was, way more than many people, but it's still great fun. It's great. Milwaukee's a great city, so I'm happy to be here.
I'm so glad we're able to bring you back. I mean, it's been
hey man, I can't thank you enough.
Like way too long, like preposterously so. Yeah. But you mentioned a little bit before the working with Joe with the Rep and that resident acting company, and there is a little like former resident acting company kind of coherence right now with you doing Thanksgiving play, Laura Gordon having directed that. You mentioned Lee Ernst being back in town to do Christmas Carol, Jim Pickering and Mark Corkins doing that Christmas Carol. I mean,
absolutely.
Yeah,
it is. I mean, that company is still working strong. John Daly just finished a show there, and it was a great time and a wonderful experience working with those actors for that many years. And I'm just feel very blessed that environment, that kind of sort of theater community was something that I was able to experience. And Lee and I were talking also about just the Pabst. And whenever I did a show at the Pabst, I had this extraordinary feeling of being at part of a theater continuum. There was something about the Pabst being pretty much probably the same, save for electrical lighting, for when it was first built, and you could climb up into the rafters during say the Fezziwig scene. If you were Cratchit, you could go do that, indulge in just looking straight down onto this amazing scene of everybody singing and moving on the stage below from about 40 feet in the air. And just the magic of that, standing on a catwalk or walking up a spiral staircase and looking down and just watching the show and reflecting on how many people had performed in that space, Oscar Wilde, Sarah Bernhardt, all kinds of people who had come there back in the day. And that is, it's interesting because theater is evolving rapidly and becoming, a lot more electronically based. I mean, Lee is saying this is the first time he's ever worn microphones. I started having to wear them in Chicago at the Goodman, my first time, where it wasn't, the actors couldn't be trusted, none of them trained to project their voices. So everybody wore mics. And it was a very strange feeling to be part of that transition to a more electronic and controlled kind of live action theater. But it's still live and it's still wonderful. I'm going to go see Christmas Carol as soon as I can.
Nice.
And the Rep company is, I think, still going strong in its individual careers. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, and that, you're saying it was how fortunate you found it to be a part of that. I mean, that you guys raised me as an artist, right? I mean,
I remember when you arrived.
I spent 20 years there. Walked in the door as an acting intern. Spent the last 10 seasons as associate artistic director. But those 10 seasons of like weekly artistic staff meetings every Friday, right? With
absolutely
Joe and the staff and the whole resident company, just to be able to sit there and listen to people who were so concerned with craft. Just talk about craft for a couple hours a week was like, I feel like I got 8 MFAs out of that experience. I mean,
it was amazing. And I feel very grateful that Joe allowed that, input, and not a common thing today, but Joe was actually eager to hear any idea, any input. And it was always very gratifying when an idea tossed out ended up getting done. It was very fun. And that, as I say, it is a time that is shifting. I went to the Alley Theater to work about 3 years ago, and there's still a core company at the Alley. And it was like, oh, I remember a core company. This is so, it was a very fun time to be with this group of people who were doing shows all season long together, and were in, their 5th and 8th and 10th and 12th seasons and 20th seasons there at the Alley. So that's still, and may probably still be going on. I'm pretty sure they haven't changed their company model, but it is a thing that can't continue, I think, in many locations just because of the logistics of it and all that. So
it's definitely harder now in terms of the sort of scope and variety and just skill set that people have to have in terms of the work that all needs to be done. Not impossible, but tricky in a market certainly Milwaukee size.
Right.
To sustain folks' lives and careers for whole seasons at a time. I mean, that's tough.
very tough. And they did have any it was very advantageous economically because we were rehearse, perform. So we were just one contract doing 2 shows a lot of the time. And that was, I think, one of the reasons company models were sustainable for a while. But things are so much more up in the air now about how things are decided that it's just not going to continue, I think, for much longer.
Yeah, no, it's really hard. It's hard. And that schedule was crazy. I mean, I sort of remember as, the person who sort of many times put together that schedule from a season planning model, like, whoa, like what you guys had to do. I mean, literally do 5 or 6 shows a year, back to back. You'd open one, you'd go right into rehearsals for the next one, close the first one, open the next one, rehearse the next one. I mean, that was just relentless. And just the thing that taught me more than anything was just the stamina necessary for a long-term career in this work. Right. And that it is actually work. I remember, I think it was Jim Baker said once, he's like, acting's a blue collar job. And I was like, oh, but wow, the hours and the pace and the artisan craft that happened over there absolutely made that.
It is a blue collar job, and I agree with that. It's a craft, and it has its nuances in terms of how you apply your intuitive skills. But at the end of the day, you're showing up at a given time, and you're putting in your hours and punching that clock and never screwing up. And there were a lot of really great backstage folk who had that same ethic, Sam Garst and people like that, who took it very, very seriously, and just very, very few screw ups, very few errors, everything done by the book and relentlessly with focus and attention. That was what it took, and it kept me very young. Actually, I have friends who are my age who went through more conventional careers, and there's, I think, something a little more creaky in there. in there, just where they're at, and I'm like, well, I have to actually still jump up and run around and sing and dance, and do things that require me to be reasonably fit, and so it's different.
So speaking of jumping up and running around and singing and dancing, Thanksgiving play.
Yes,
let's talk about that ridiculousness a little bit. You having a good time doing it?
I am having a blast, and I say this in talkbacks as well. I have such respect for the script. It's a great script, and I wouldn't say that if I didn't feel it. I would, talk about something else and just steer the topic away. But I do think the words are just a blast to speak. The ideas are so really extraordinarily well crafted, and the mimicry skill of sort of language and culture that she has, where she can really listen. And I think she obviously was like a fly on a wall in those rehearsals that she sat through her career, where she just listened to those conversations and just recreated them. And I love this show so much because actually there are a few minor exceptions, and nothing in it is really a parody. It is actually just what people would say and do say. They just line them up, in a row. And so, and it's sort of, what's absurd about it is it just is relentless. It just, but many of those exchanges in the play are lifted from actual conversations, I'm sure, or recreations of what she recalled from conversations that would normally take place. So there's nothing that is invented or lampooned. It's just like, well, that was said, let's put it next to this that was said, and let's line them all up. And then we have some appreciation for just how how funny and odd it is that these kinds of conversations take place. So I love it. And I actually feel like there's nothing that I say, with the exception of my defense of Columbus Day, because I'm Italian-American ancestry, my character Caden, nothing I say that is in fact anything other than straight up what I've researched. And I think I actually am a stand-in for the research that she did, because when you read the backstory of her work on it, she researched extensively the Thanksgiving story and the many different Thanksgivings. And I'm actually the voice of that research. So I'm certainly not a character that has some strange and bizarre viewpoint on things. I'm just the historian character. So a lot of what I say, vast majority of what I say, is what I would say if I were in a Thanksgiving play and I were doing the same thing. So, and I am a history buff, so I feel very close to this role, very close in terms of the appreciation for looking back into the past, finding facts, recreating those facts, and being true to what really occurred. So that's what's great about it. I just sort of do what I would do as me with a few embellishments, but it's very fun.
Yeah, and Larissa is a maniacal researcher in all of her work. Just, there's sometimes she's moving into the film world now more than theater, and every once in a while, post a picture on Facebook of like, oh, starting into a new writer's room today or into a new gig, and just like a foot of research material. Just this is got to get through this week. It's really that's a cool thing,
and I admire it greatly, and I think it's one of the things that makes her such a very fun playwright to collaborate with as an actor, because it's so immaculately researched, and there's nothing that I would go.
I agree with what you're saying about there being nothing in the play that is not true. Right, from sort of that particular perspective or lens. But it's all true. I've heard all of those things before in rehearsal halls, or in larger conversations about theater. And it's the thing that I like the most about it is for the theater insider part of it, right? Is to sort of open the door a little bit and allow us to get our heads out of our own butts a little bit in terms of how we can sometimes so myopically approach the work.
Right.
Particularly all of the speculation that people always do about what people who are not in the room are going to think, which is, I think a really great metaphor for how we're trying to reorganize America right now, right? Yep. And like, let's actually get the people in the room that we're trying to change things for the better for, and see what they would like. Perhaps the revolutionary act of asking someone what they want, as opposed to just assuming, is sort of at the core of that play.
Yeah, I really hope Larissa continues writing great plays. I know that it's very tempting to do what she's doing, and I understand the logic of focusing her energy on film and television. But I really, really hope that I can do another one of her plays sometime in the future. If there's some possibility that I could do it, I would love that.
Yeah, she's really, really great. So the show runs through December 19th, so we have a few weeks worth of shows left. And if there's anybody sitting on the fence about coming and seeing it right now, why would you encourage folks to join us?
Well, I can only say that my wife, who is one of the more ruthless critics of theater I know, watched the video of it and laughed all the way through it, and was eager to see the show. And the show, and I only mention her because, as I say, she's a very tough audience, and she knows a good theater production when she sees one, and so you should do it for that reason. You should see it for that reason. But I actually think I find it hard to imagine someone coming to the show and going like, not my cup of tea, unless they have some kind of agenda about what's happening in the show. And I don't think most people who come to the show would have an agenda that would get in the way of them seeing and reflecting on the kinds of conversations that have to happen and end up happening in ways that are very tortured and agonizing, but funny in this production. The other thing about this show that I really love is it has a great heart. It's a big heart. There's no singling out of people for some kind of behavior. There's no judgment. People say what they would say, and there's sort of a, like I say, fly on the wall, like that's just being said. I'm just saying, hey, including those interludes that we have that were taken from the internet that show, I think, much more extreme versions of ignorance than the actors than the characters in her play do about what Thanksgiving means and who it's for and who gets excluded. Those interludes are the most difficult thing for me to do because I have to maintain the character of a person that would subscribe to this kind of behavior. So they're the awkward part of the show. But of course, they're not things that she wrote. They're just things she found. But other than that, I think many audience members will come away with a kind of appreciation for her sense of humor and humanity that pervades the show. It's really a kind of releasing of permission to make mistakes. The idea that it's okay to screw up, and our great dramaturg for this production, Ben Wilson, who is in the Choctaw Nation and who has a great insight into what we would want to look at. He I think just growing up in Milwaukee and having an experience of living in the theater world in a obviously dominantly Anglo-American environment, where he knows what would be best for us to understand, that's crucial for us to understand. Mm-hmm. And those things that he shared were very invaluable to me, and they were all experience-based. He really shared his experience of what he has been through in a way that made my desire to reach out all the more enthusiastic on my part. I really want to look for better ways to actually reach out to the Native American community. I've always, typical white viewpoint for me has been, they're really, wow, it feels so bad that it all happened, and wonderful culture and all that kind of stuff. And it's actually far, far deeper than that in terms of the experience on the ground of Native Americans, especially in the urban environments where the vast majority of Native Americans reside now, not on reservations. And that was a great learning experience for me. And Ben was very quick to point out, I make mistakes. I screw up all the time. I'm not exempt from saying the wrong thing in the wrong way to the wrong person. So don't worry about it. Just correct anything that you think, if you've hurt someone, try to not do that again. And he mentioned another great thing. I forget the context of the question, but it was about what are some examples of things that have hurt you? And he really didn't have any specifics, but he said, I always know when I have been hurt, when I can't get to sleep at night. If I'm tossing and turning, why did they say that? What did they mean by that? Why would I be treated that way? And that was really great for me to hear, because I think all of us have had that, where we have somebody slighted us or said something to us that we just can't let go of that. And on his in his sharing of that, I really got, I've never had to have that experience of somebody maligning who I am as a Anglo-American, because it's just, not something that I have to do, because it's not something that I feel I'm in a place where people are coming at me for being who I am, and he is. And so I just felt really honored to be in a position to have a conversation like that, where other people are going to work, coming home, doing their lives. I'm sitting in a room having conversations about these things in a way that makes me feel like I'm becoming a little more adept at being a better person.
Yeah. So
that was what I loved about doing the show, and what I think people will come away with.
Yeah.
I really believe it's embedded in the production. You come away with a sense of celebration of the fact that this show is what it is, and that it's so incredibly brilliantly realized. I really am proud of being in it.
Yeah, no, I'm so glad to hear that. And the icing on that cake being Torrey Hanson in a full-size inflatable pumpkin.
Yes, it's always one of the challenges of the show, getting my feet through the pumpkin holes with my shoes on, and there's always a rush at the end, and get the inflation fan running, and get out the door or out onto the stage area.
Yeah. I could never help, whenever I see that scene, just sort of sitting back and be like, that is one of America's finest classical actors. A giant inflatable pumpkin.
Yes.
What have we done?
It is funny, and it's like it's a great beginning of the show. It's obviously sets the tone for the show, and I love all of the goofiness that we get to do as well, which is just plain fun. It's farcically goofy, fun stuff. But a lot of the show is, as I say, just regular what you'd hear. Yeah. You went into a rehearsal of any show that's trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, and you had mentioned before, talking about Monique seeing the video of it. Mm-hmm. For those who did join us for the virtual production last year, it is a different production this year. Half the cast is new. We have the ability now, in a slightly more relaxed world of COVID restrictions, to actually have human beings closer together physically, which changes a lot of the storytelling. So even for those of you sitting out watching this thinking, yeah, I saw it on the screen last year, it's a very different thing, to say nothing of the ability of the sort of the collective experience of laughing in a room with people. So even if you think you've seen it, you haven't seen this version. So do stop by and check us out again.
Absolutely.
Through December 19th.
We actually
Torrey, thank you.
I want to say one thing. We had an
Yeah.
audience member last night who saw both the video and the live production, and
Oh.
she went, "This is a completely different experience. This is wonderful. I couldn't recommend
Good.
it enough to people."
No,
So,
I'm glad. I'm very glad that people
Yeah.
are having that experience. Yeah, because it is. I mean, there's watching something on a screen is one thing. Watching it in a group of human beings is a totally other thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's a different production with different people made entirely under different constraints is,
Right.
yeah, it's an all new deal. But so come see it. No excuses. 3
Please.
more weeks. Cool. Thanks, Tori. I appreciate your time.
Absolutely.
And, yeah, I appreciate you coming over to play, man.
Thanks for having me,
Good.
Brent.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Take care. We'll see
Bye-bye,
you
all.
next week.